Well, Rocket, I finally finished it. This is my book review video of Wolfsong by TJ Klune, a 2016 gay, romantic, fantasy, um, adventure, coming of age drama novel with thriller elements. Uh, Adults only, and I'll say that because despite the cute YA looking cover, um, it's got some pretty hardcore sex and violence, so it's pretty much absolutely not for kids. Anyways, so if you don't want to, if you don't like homosexual fantasy escapist, uh, indulgent novels that really promote homosexuality as an ideal, you're not going to like this book. I suppose if you're open-minded to it, it might turn you on to it. Then again, depending on your type of gay, it might turn you off to it. My reaction was like somewhat in between, so it really, man, it's confusing. I'm so innerly conflicted. I have such a complex opinion. I'll do my best to try to summarize it in as convenient a time as possible. So I'll just start by saying the highlights. This is really well written. So this guy, he understands modern speak, and you can't really do that unless you have an understanding of just the English language in general, especially in certain scenes towards the end. Probably some of the most memorable sections. He does what I like to do as a prose nerd, which is break conventions and let the phonetic flow sort of paint the visuals in your mind. And without any spoilers, that is something that really just kind of nails the overall immersive experience. It's almost annoying how smooth everything just kind of flows and how quick and good of a read it is. I won't say the prose is like fancy, but the bottom line is this guy's a good writer and a good storyteller. The next best thing I like about it, he's really good at making relationships grow and like feel like naturally believably grow into themselves and go from an immature state to a mature state over time, and you do really feel the passing of time in this book. I love books that have that immersive quality. So he's great at writing characters. Characters are good people. They're empathetic in their core. I wouldn't say they're the most virtuous people, but overall, this book is really good at also probably, despite those two great qualities, my favorite thing about this book, the main character, Oxnard Mason. So basically the story is there's this pretty much a simpleton country redneck living type of average Joe kid who is living a pretty obscure life, whose parents are not the best. His father's somewhat abusive and then abandons his family. He's basically living in a little house in Oregon, in this place called Green Creek. I'm actually from Oregon, and I come from a place called Griffin Creek. And I sort of had a similar. So it was this. I weirdly related to this book in many ways. So a good, very familiar sense of atmosphere, non-conventional character taking a totally average Joe person with a very average intelligence, who is just by nature very relatable and very empathetic to a lot of people. And that insight was something you don't see very often. You kind of take it for granted. Most books, there's usually something special or extraordinary about the characters. With this main character, Ox, he's really just a very pure-hearted, loyal person who doesn't have much ego. And it's his lack of ego that draws people around him throughout the story. So that was one of the most memorable personal characters I've ever seen. So basically, there's another theme of the story without giving anything away that really has to do with going from a place of obscurity to gradually finding yourself through your connections and your commitment to other people, shall we say. And that's also something that is, I found to be, by the end of the book, reaching such a emotional, pleasing, climactic satisfaction, so to say, that it really did weave its way into my heart. Just concerning the greater theme of family. So those are, for me, those are some of the biggest takeaways of the book. There's also some really good humor. There's some awkward humor, friendship, And oh, another thing, really surprisingly good immersive action scenes. And I respected the book for not skimping away or censoring anything to get a more authentic immersive experience. There's some genuine shocks. The violence of it kind of caught me off guard. If you don't like hardcore violence, if you're sensitive to that, you might want to consider that, which I didn't expect at all. Which ties into my next point, some of my beef with the book, some of the things I didn't like so much. So the book really presents itself it almost seems to oversell itself as being this very, I want to say, wholesome, sentimental, classy romance. Um, and as time goes on, and by the way, for the record, if this isn't your type of gay romance, it's so hard to do gay romance because everybody has their different take on it, their different version of it. It's like if you have something that's peculiar to you that you like, and someone gets it slightly wrong. It's almost offensive to you because it's close enough to the thing you like that it turns you the other way. I had a little bit of that going on for me. For the record, I don't personally think um, gay homosexuality in and of itself is by nature virtuous, but this book really almost feels like propaganda at times to sell that. I was more interested in the characters, the story, that sort of thing. And I look at, in fiction, I look at homosexual relationships and romantic, obviously romantic, homosexual, all of it as fantasy that I was sort of curious about in the past, to put it simply. But in the real world, to me, it is not really my thing. And for a lot of people, it is. So in any case, it's not nothing offended me because I don't really get offended easily. But it almost was disappointing the fact that at a certain point in the book, it almost turns into like a porno. And that was something that also caught me off guard, like the violence, where I was like, all right, on one hand, I respect the authenticity, but by the end of the book, it almost seems like the author is trying to sell this idea that such a thing as class and romance and sexual indulgence are interchangeable and intercomplementary concepts. I think that is fantasy, and that's not very responsible. And that point is sold so well through the emotional heft of the narrative and the overall presentation that I thought that was a bit, I don't know, a bit deceitful, maybe even a little bit corny. It wasn't really my thing. So that kind of made me recoil a little bit from giving it a 9 or a 10 out of 10, and I have to go with like a 7. So I would say this is a good time, powerful narrative, but it is for me a complete work of fantasy. I enjoyed it, but there was a lot of things that I was just like, I'm not getting behind this. This isn't my type of thing. The type of gay romance that's pure fantasy, escapist, indulgence, guilty pleasure that I'd want to see would rely more on implication and subtlety and not exploitation. But I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. You see, if that's your thing, if you want to go full throttle into defending the argument that like sex is the new class in romance, and that's how you define romance, who can say? That's just my opinion. So hopefully that doesn't offend anybody. But if I'm being honest, um, overall, this is for me. The story is great because it's a memorable experience for the characters. There's coming of age elements. There's all these powerful themes. It's nostalgic. It's relatable. The dialogue is really good. There's some powerful scenes. It is very emotional. It's extremely personal, and above all, I'd say you really can't help but relate to this author for a reason of just pure. This book really feels like it's coming from the most authentic place that an author can give, and that takes some serious guts as well as passion. And this is just obviously a work of passion. Some people would describe it as like Twilight but with gay werewolves. I haven't read Twilight, but I imagine it's something like that. But I'd say it's probably a lot better in the way that it's written, because I don't know, but I just think that it happens to be well written, especially in the times where it breaks conventions of style. And what it lacks in show-offish like prose, it makes up for with being immersed in what I'd call modern blue-collar type speak, like the type of way that people like me talk, like really down to earth. And as a dialogue prose nerd, that's something that I really like to see. So This is not my favorite book ever, but I had a good time. Recommend it to anyone who's open-minded about getting a different perspective on themes of romance, deep friendship, feeling like a nobody and then becoming someone through a special connection with someone else. And I think that's probably going to be a universal feeling that anyone has, regardless of how they feel towards the very infinitely controversial subject of homosexuality and whatnot. So anyway, I give it a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching.